Anyone who's already seen one of my previous Doctor Who videos looking at the 5-inch action figure scale from character options will already know that the peak years for output from this line was between 2006 and 2011. Character options were prolific in their releases during this time frame. They were producing any number of 5-inch action figures of every character you could possibly think of, both from the new show and even the classic show. They were producing TARDIS console sets, flying TARDISes, and even role-playing toys such as sonic screwdrivers and Cybermen helmets. But they also had a very brief flirtation with an experimental line of 12-inch action figures. This line would ultimately prove to be short-lived, but there were a number of pretty interesting releases as part of it. And today I'm going to start a new series of videos looking back at this collection. And in this first video, I'm going to start by looking at the TARDIS team of the Doctor and the companion at the time, which was Martha Jones. Now, these figures were released between Series 2 and Series 3, and so what we tend to find is a smattering of characters or monsters that we see from the second series and a handful from the first half of Series 3. And as such, there are 3 variations on the Doctor. We have a Series 2 release of the Doctor in his brown costume, and then we have the Series 3 in his updated blue costume. The difference is fairly subtle, of course, but the most noticeable thing, I think, is the colour of the trainers. The Series 2 figure has white trainers, the Series 3 has red. But they also managed to release the Doctor in his spacesuit. This is a radically different look. It's a completely different costume, although the body and the head sculpt are exactly the same. The costuming and the accessories are completely different. And it's a pretty cool choice in hindsight, since the Doctor would go on to wear this costume in several future episodes as well. So it's quite a distinctive look, a legitimate variant for the 10th Doctor. And it's also one of the trickier ones to find on the secondary market. So let's take a look at the figure itself. Now this of course is the Series 3, this is the blue outfit with the red trainers. I think the cut of the suit is really nicely done, it looks tightly fitted, it looks properly to scale. And I have to say, I think the head sculpt is remarkably accurate. This is quite clearly and very distinctly David Tennant. I think they've caught his likeness very, very well here. They've got the intense stare of the eyes, they've got the aquiline nose and mouth. I think it just works really, really well. Now the only things I might criticise it for here is the hair, but obviously they have used the same head that was on the Series 2 figure. Now in that series, David Tennant had slightly longer hair when he had it trimmed back for Series 3. So here it doesn't look quite accurate when we put it against the Series 3 photo, but nevertheless, overall, I'm very, very happy with this. I think this is a really good likeness for a figure at this price point at this time. Again, I think the tailoring on this figure is very nicely fitted. It looks really good. It accurately represents what we see on screen. I like the pinstripe. I've always had a preference for the blue costume. It's just a little bit brighter, a little bit more colourful, and I think it works really well on this figure as well. And I think they've done a nice job there with the tie, which is a separate piece, the collar, and I think it all comes together very, very neatly. Now you can undo this. There is a little bit of Velcro, so if you wanted, you could undo the top and have him remove that. It is sewn together at the top. You can easily undo that, just trim that if you wanted to, and you can actually remove the jacket. Both hands are open in a slight gripping stance, so they can hold various different extra pieces if you want them to. Obviously, that right hand there is sculpted perfectly to hold the sonic screwdriver. Sadly, I have misplaced my own sonic screwdriver, but take it from me, he can hold this very, very comfortably in this grip here. It fits nice and snug in that hand. Now I should point out that both of these hands are a hard plastic, they're not rubber, so there's no real give in them. You can't really manipulate them in any way particularly, but they are solid enough that if you have an object that fits, he can grip most things pretty comfortably. And at the bottom we have his rubber trainers. These are all one piece, but they are very nicely sculpted and very nicely painted. There's no bleed here. We can see the laces look pretty authentic, even though it's just all built into the sculpt. And I think they've done a nice job. Again, the red ones in particular really stand out as being quite vibrant and colourful, and I think they've done a pretty decent job. And when it comes to articulation, these figures are no slouch either, because he has a ball joint in his head, meaning he can spin his head 360 degrees, he can lean from side to side, he can nod forwards and backwards, and of course move it from side to side. So it looks really healthy, pretty diverse range of motion here, which is brilliant. There's ball joints in the shoulders, meaning of course he can kick his arms up and out. There's even a bicep swivel at the top there. There is a single joint at the elbow so he can bend his lower arm to roughly 90 degrees. And there is a pin swivel at the wrist. So again, he can rotate that wrist 360 degrees, and of course he can hinge it forwards and backwards as well. There's articulation in the chest, so he can more or less move from side to side with that joint. You can see there's a little bit of a ball joint there, so we can get a little bit of movements in that upper chest region, which is pretty cool. And then there is another ball joint in the waist, which is really dramatic because of course we can spin the character from side to side, bend him forwards and backwards, lean him from side to side. So pretty comprehensive stuff here in terms of articulation. He's also got joints in the hips, meaning he can kick his legs out to the side. He's got an upper thigh swivel. He can kick his legs forwards, backwards. There is a double jointed knee, meaning he can kick his lower foot all the way towards back there. And of course, there is a swivel at the ankle as well. Now, aside from the sonic screwdriver, he doesn't come with any accessories. And I've always wished that they had given him his coat. It's such an important part of the 10th Doctor's look and appearance, and it's really sad that we didn't even get a variant with this option. That said, it is pretty easy to customise. I borrowed this coat from another figure in my collection. It was the 12-inch Han Solo on Endor. And although those figures tend to be a little bit chunkier, a little bit bigger, broader, more muscular, that actually works in the favour of transferring it over to our 10th Doctor. This looks pretty nice in terms of its scale. Now, admittedly, there are certain patches of brown that we see on here, which isn't quite accurate, of course, but nevertheless, I think it's a pretty decent stand-in. And because it is bigger, there's a little bit more give, there's a little bit more flexibility for what you can do with it, and it works surprisingly well. I have to say, I think this is a really good stand-in. And if nothing else, it gives you a glimpse into what this figure would look like with a properly tailored coat, and I think it's a really good look, and it only serves to enhance this figure even further, and I think it looks so good like this. So I'm really very pleased with this figure overall. Like I said, it would be nice if he came with a coat, but if you can customize one yourself like this, I think we actually have a really surprisingly good quality figure for the price point and the scale and the time of production. I think this is a really nice figure all in all. Okay, so next up we have the one and only companion that was produced as part of this line, and that was Martha Jones. Now, in terms of the packaging, something I didn't comment on earlier, but you can see the standard approach for this packaging across the line was to have this sort of trapezoid shape box. It had obviously the Doctor Who logo, bright and colourful on the front there, and it used those colours throughout the rest of the packaging, and it looks pretty nice. On the side we can see a portrait of the character and of course the character's name there, so you could in theory stack these up on your shelf and you'll have a pretty decent looking collection there. Whilst on the reverse we have the Doctor Who logo, we have that TARDIS at the bottom which looks glorious. I love it spinning through space like that. It's really colourful and vibrant and fun and quite dynamic. It gives it a real sense of movement, which is nice. And of course we have a production photo of the character and a little bit of a bio at the very top there. So all in all, I think this looks really presentable. I think they've done quite a nice job. It's quite colourful and fun, this packaging. I also really like the cardboard inlay as well. They've taken a photo from one of the episodes of one of the locations, which is New Earth. I think this is really nice and interesting and a bit different. Quick warning for collectors though. My figure had been mint in box for many years. It had never been opened. I opened it exclusively for this video, and as you can see, the figure took a lot of damage upon release. As soon as I liberated this figure from the packaging, the jacket started to disintegrate before my very eyes. It was slightly soul destroying, I've got to be honest. But as you can see here, this is a faux leather jacket. Now it looks absolutely exquisite. I think they've done a very nice job of it. Obviously it had this Velcro so you could remove the jacket, and it's nice to see that she's got, you know, her costume underneath, which we see in some of the other episodes. So there is a couple of different diverse looks in this figure, which is a really nice touch. However, over time, this faux leather, as you can see, perishes upon contact. It just wants to flake apart, and it's the most disheartening thing as a collector that can happen. So if you have one that's minted sealed and you're on the fence about whether opening it up, I would recommend that you do not open it because you don't want to go through this experience. I'm going to have to try and track down another one now, I think. A real shame, because I do think the design is lovely. I think that faux leather effect is really nice on toys. It's very effective, but sadly it is no match for the Ravagers of time, and as you can see, it just flakes away, and it looks pretty horrible when it does. And I think it's a real shame, because overall this is actually a pretty nice figure. I think the head sculpt again is really well done. This is a fantastic likeness of the actor Freema Agyeman. I think they've done a really good job of this. They've cut the hair as well, which is quite tricky to do. Thankfully they've opted for a solid plastic rather than some of that rooted doll's hair that we sometimes see in these figures. I think this works really well for this figure and this character. As I said, I think the likeness is pretty spot on, to be honest, and I couldn't ask for more. The hands, of course, are pretty unique to this figure. We even see some of the ring detail on those fingers there, which looks really good, very nicely painted. Nice to see something very unique and different about this particular figure. There weren't an awful lot of female characters produced for this line. In fact, there were just 2. So this is pretty interesting. It definitely makes the collection a lot more diverse and fun. And again, top marks for the tailoring. I really love these jeans. They've got their nice flares at the bottom there. They look pretty authentic. They have a really nice texture and feel to them as well. So this looks absolutely brilliant. She's also got sculpted boots as well, which I think is a nice touch. And she stands very easily on her feet without the use of a stand as well. So credit to them for being able to balance her so that she can stand free. The articulation scheme is pretty consistent across all of these figures. Once again, we have that ball joint in the head, which actually has an extra swivel there that you can see, which is fantastic. So you can move this head from side to side, spin it right the way around, nod it forwards or backwards. A huge range of motion here, which is absolutely brilliant. Again, ball joints in the shoulders, allowing the arms to kick up and out to the side, that upper bicep swivel, the single joint at the elbow, and of course, the pin swivel at the wrist. And then once again we have the points of articulation in the chest and in the waist as well, allowing this figure to rotate right the way around, lean from side to side and bend forwards and backwards. A huge range of motion in these figures, which is absolutely brilliant. It's the same articulation in the hips. Now the jeans and this trouser do make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more stiff to be able to get the most out of this articulation, but there's still plenty of movement here, which is great. Of course we have that upper thigh swivel and the joints at the knee as well, allowing that lower leg to kick all the way back, and then finally that swivel at the boot as well. Sadly, Martha doesn't come with any accessories at all, which is a real shame, but then not strictly necessary in truth. I think this is a really nice figure. Here she is without the jacket. Of course, having the jacket on hides some of the joints, but if you don't mind this, then you do actually have an option for a second look for this character, and she does wear this outfit without the jacket in a handful of episodes in this series. So I think we actually have a couple of different looks in one figure, which is absolutely fantastic. Ultimately, this line is off to a really good start. Both the Doctor and the Companion, I think, are excellent figures. They're very good likenesses. They have really wonderful articulation, and the tailoring, for the most part, is pretty spectacularly accurate as well. So really solid stuff for any 12-inch collectors out there. The only downside, in my opinion, is there is a real lack of accessories. Sadly, the 10th Doctor does not come with his trench coat, which I think would make such a visual impact and would make this figure even better, in my opinion. And then my big criticism, of course, would be the faux leather that was used on Martha's jacket. Now, obviously, that is something that can only be tested in hindsight. It's something we know now all these years later, but it is nevertheless very disappointing that it does disintegrate over time like this unless you're able to store it in very, very careful conditions. Okay, so that's it for this week. Join me next time as I start to look at some of the monsters and aliens that were produced as part of this 12-inch line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.